In the standard 7.G.5, where we are to use facts about supplementary, complementary, vertical, and adjacent angles in a multi-step problem to write and solve simple equations of an unknown figure, we may be given a problem like this, where we are asked to determine if each of these statements is always true, sometimes true, or never true. So the thing that we have to remember in a problem like this is, first of all, complementary angles are angles, and I'm going to abbreviate here, complementary angles, add to 90 degrees. Supplementary angles, I'm going to abbreviate again, add to 180 degrees. So a complementary angle situation might look like this, where maybe one angle is 38 degrees and another angle is 52 degrees. Those two add up to 90 degrees. So those are complementary angles. Supplementary angles, a lot of times a picture might look like this, where maybe this angle is 80 degrees and this angle is 100 degrees. Once again, those add to 180, so that makes those two angles supplementary angles. Sometimes we also refer to them as a linear pair because of the fact that those two angles are right next to each other on a line. Also, in both of these pictures, we have adjacent angles because adjacent angles sit next to each other. But for a situation to be complementary, we don't necessarily have to have adjacent angles. Same thing with supplementary. So the last thing that we need to talk about here are angles that are called vertical angles. And so when we have two lines intersecting each other right there, these two angles right here are called vertical angles. They sit across from each other. And vertical angles, I'm going to abbreviate, are the same. In other words, they're exactly the same size, which means they're congruent to each other. But those aren't the only two vertical angles in this picture. Those two angles right there are also vertical angles. So if the blue check mark on the left is 80 degrees, the blue check mark on the right is also 80 degrees. If the red asterisk on top of that picture is 100 degrees, the red asterisk underneath of that is also 100 degrees. So now we should have enough information to answer these questions here. So the sum of two supplementary angles is 90 degrees. Well, that is never true because remember, supplementary angles always add to 180 right there. Vertical angles are also adjacent angles. Well, both of these pictures right here are pictures of complementary and supplementary, but they're also adjacent angles because they sit right next to each other. But these vertical angles over here, clearly those are not adjacent to each other. So vertical angles are never adjacent. Two supplementary angles are complementary. Well, that would be like saying that 180 degrees can also be 90 degrees. That's never true. If the measure of an angle is represented by x, then the measure of its complement is represented by 180 minus x. Well, that would be never true. And just so you know, these kinds of questions, they're not always just like never true, never true, never true. It just happens to be in this one. For this to be even remotely true at all, this would have to be 90 minus x, because once again, complementary angles or complements of each other have to add up to 90 degrees. And if two lines intersect each other, each pair of vertical angles are congruent. Well, that's basically what we have right here. We have those two green lines are intersecting each other, or crossing each other. And the two red asterisks with those angles are vertical, and they're the same. They're congruent, and same thing with the two blue check marks. So this one happens to be always true. So in situations like this, you got to think about all of the different possibilities that could happen with questions like these. In the standard 7.G.5, where we are using facts about supplementary, complementary, vertical, and adjacent angles to solve problems, we may be presented with a problem like this. So here we have a picture of line XU and line WY intersecting at point A, as you can see in that picture. We can also see that this specific angle right here, YAU, is 53 degrees. So now let's take a look at the questions. So, statement number 1, angle XAZ. Well, by the way, XAZ happens to be this angle right here. XAZ is equal to 180 minus angle ZAY. Well, angle ZAY is right here. And minus angle YAU, which happens to be this angle right here. Well, if we look at all three angles here, we've got all three of those angles on that line right there. So that means this angle plus this angle plus this angle have to add up to 180 degrees. So clearly, if you took 180 and subtracted this one and this one, that would leave you with that angle right there. So this one would have to be true. Next question, angle ZAX. Well, ZAX is, once again, right there. And angle YAU, angle YAU is right here. Those are complementary angles. Well, the only way to figure that out is if we actually find maybe this missing angle right here. Well, this little square right here means this angle's 90. And so, if that's 90 and all three of these are on the straight line and they have to add up to 180, 180 minus 90 is 90. And then 90 minus 53 is 37 degrees. So this is 37. So clearly 37 and 53 make 90 degrees. Therefore, they are complementary angles. And then the last question. Angle YAU, YAU is right here, plus WAU, that's this angle right here. They add up to 90 degrees. Well, that cannot be the case. First of all, this angle right here is clearly more than 90 degrees, and 90 and 53 is more than 90. And then another reason is both of these angles lie on that line right there. So that means they have to both add up to 180, which would actually make them supplementary. So this question is false. So that's how you would deal with a problem like this where you're trying to figure out whether statements are true or false. In the standard 8.G.5, where we are asked to use facts about supplementary, complementary, vertical, and adjacent angles to solve problems, we may be presented with a problem like this, where we have line XU and line WY intersecting at point A, and we're given the fact that angle YAU is 50 degrees, and we're asked questions like these. First statement, an angle supplementary to angle WAU. Here is angle WAU. An angle supplementary to that measures 130 degrees. Well, first of all, since these two angles are on this straight line right here, that means they are supplementary to each other. And so that means this angle has to be 130. It's not saying that angle WAU is 130, this statement. It's saying that an angle supplementary to that is 130. That's not true, because an angle supplementary to WAU is actually 50 degrees, because 130, which is what this angle is, plus 50 degrees is 180 degrees. So this is false. An angle complementary to WAX, well, WAX happens to be this angle right here. So an angle that's complementary to that, remember complementary angles add to 90, measures 50 degrees. Well, because that angle is vertical to this one, because we've got these two lines intersecting each other, this angle here happens to be 50 degrees. So an angle complementary to 50 is actually 40 degrees. So this is actually false as well. And then the last part, angle vertical to YAU. Well, YAU is right here. The angle vertical to that one is this one right here. And since that's 50, this has to be 50 as well. So the angle vertical to YAU measures 50 degrees. That is true. In the standard 7.G.5, where we are asked to use facts about supplementary, complementary, vertical, and adjacent angles to solve problems, we may be presented with a problem like this, where we are trying to determine whether each equation is true or false. Well, this statement right here is saying that angle A plus B is 90 degrees. Well, here's angle A, here's angle B, but they're both sitting on this straight line, so that means that they are supplementary to each other, which means they have to add to 180. So clearly, this statement is false. Second statement, 180 plus B is equal to 180. Well, that would mean B would have to be 0 degrees. Clearly, B is not 0 degrees. It looks like it's around 90-ish. So this is false. And then the last statement, 180 minus B. So let's just pretend that B is 89 degrees, because it actually looks like it's a little bit less than 90. So 180 minus 89 is 91, and of course that would be what angle A is. So this is actually a true statement.